Joining me on the program now from Pillar, Nathan Seiuli. Kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
The power of words, I suppose, and the twisting of meaning. This is, it's classic George Orwell in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. There's a saying that goes, the first person who decided to hurl an insult as opposed to a stone, birthed civilization, or at that moment, civilization dawned. And we live in the greatest, most prosperous age because the battlegrounds that we fight on now are largely filled with words.
Yeah.
But you sort of mentioned it in your intro, Andrew. There's been a cheapening and a redefinition and a reinterpretation of certain words and words that have significant impact. And actually, these words are starting to lose their power, but it's also making those people who use those words lose their credibility. So it's really interesting to watch.
And it is happening. I mean, we're focusing in on the word genocide because that has hit the headlines for all sorts of reasons. And even in the use of it as a headline, there's an aspect where saying, hey, if I put genocide in the headline, I'm going to get more clicks. That's the society that we've become, that if it can be more outrageous or more shocking, more people are likely to go, oh, gosh, what's that all about? But it cheapens the discourse as well, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. Look, we should be fighting to use the most accurate language possible to clarify, to debate, to advance conversation, not to stick labels on people that discourage them from participation. Things like genocide, racist, Nazi. Like, I got called a Nazi, and when I showed up, the person saw me. I said, "Have you ever met a Samoan Nazi before?" It takes the power out of what these words actually mean and what they're connected to. And if we're not careful, it really makes people who should be leaders or viewed as heroes become hypocrites.
Yeah, and to be fair, it does happen on both sides of the aisle to an extent. Some people get called Nazis and fascists, others get called socialists and communists, loony lefties, all sorts of things. This type of banter, as you say, it's better than throwing actual rocks, but we should at least get our facts right.
Or exactly, when we fail to use the war of words effectively, what does happen is actual harm happens, real violence, and we saw it this week.
Yeah.
When words are categorized and labeled as violence, it justifies a violent response. And that's why we have to be really intentional about the words that we do use, because they are inflammatory. They do have real meaning. And I've never been a person who says that words can't hurt. Of course, words can hurt. But what hurts more than words is actual violence, is actual attacks.
Yeah.
So when we start to label words as violent and justify a violent response, we're only going to see things get worse and worse, and dialogue becomes less and less common.
We've certainly seen, a bit of hypocrisy, and I don't mean that word lightly, some direct contradictions that this week, particularly from people using words as weapons and then turning the tables on that very quickly and saying, do you want to unpack that story for us? Because I think the hypocrisy in it is quite evident when we lay out the facts.
100%. What I call it is selective condemnation. And what we saw happen, obviously, was there's been a specific side of the argument, say the left, who have for a long time said that words are violence and that we have to limit the use of certain words and that words can break things and ruin things. And then they're also the same side that is justifying the assassination of, semi-political figures in the US and justifying the attack on our foreign minister's home here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It really discredits them and it makes them less credible when it comes to issues that they're really passionate about, say the climate and things like that, because people don't take their words seriously anymore. You can't say on Monday we condemn the violence of words and then on Tuesday deny actual violence and property damage that's happening in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, the aspect of that, and wanting to jump into this a little bit, the way in which words are twisted, genocide, a horrific thing, but that's not war. War is also, in my opinion, a horrific thing, but these are different categories. There is an aspect with the war that is happening between Israel and Gaza, where both nations don't recognize each other's right to exist, but that's not the same as genocide either. And there's a whole lot of weight, there's a whole lot of history behind these words, particularly using the word genocide in the context of the people of Israel. That's not by accident. There's an intentionality to that.
Oh, absolutely. There's a complete misrepresentation from both sides about what's happening. First and foremost, people who say, "Oh, it's complicated and nuanced," while they're right, it's also a cop-out answer.
Yeah.
This conflict has been going for 2,000 years or longer, and both sides have done some very horrible things.
Yeah.
But it is not a genocide. What is happening is there's a right to defend themselves as a nation. Israel is the only democratic nation in that region of the world, surrounded by 52 other Arab states. And there's countless examples throughout history where the solutions that are on the table, such as a two-state solution or the laying down of arms, have happened and have been absolutely horrible. You have to ask yourself the question, if tomorrow Israel laid down all their arms and said, we won't defend ourselves anymore, what would actually happen? If they opened the borders, what would actually happen? And anyone who wants to be intellectually honest and have a view of history will know the answer to that question. It's not very nice.
Certainly. Hey, this also made it to parliamentary debate as well. And look, there are rules of parliamentary debate. And hey, perhaps this is naive and expecting our politicians to have a high standard of intellectual rigour. However, a call to say, hey, let's not use the word genocide in parliamentary debate, is that type of sanctioning important? Now, it was shut down pretty quickly by Jerry Brownlee, I understand. But should we take some words off the table, or at least have some standards in our parliament where if we use those words, we do so with some level of accuracy?
I think if we took a snapshot of 2025 in our parliament and looked at some of the words that have been thrown around, some pretty vulgar words,
Yeah.
it would be unlike any year preceding it. But the answer is not to limit or restrict or to ban certain words. Words expose, words clarify, words define, and people. And this is what I love about language and what I love about freedom of speech is that it allows idiots to expose themselves. If we ban the use of certain words or ideologies or terms, what we do is we pretty cover for some of these people to hide some of the ideas that should be challenged publicly. So I think it's a band-aid approach to an issue that we actually need to do precision surgery on, and not surgery of removing or limiting the use of words, but to fix some really deep problems in the body that is our government. So banning never going to work. It's going to entrench views further. It's going to push people into their corner further, and it's going to make them feel more oppressed, even though they're not oppressed. It's going to make them perceive that they're oppressed, and they'll come out swinging even harder. And they'll have public support because they'll be viewed as a victim.
There are some words that we don't say in polite society, and there are restrictions on where you can say those words, and you can get arrested for saying those words. I'm not going to ask you for a list, Nathan. We're on Christian radio, remember?
I've got it tattooed on
No,
no. Andrew, what I would say, you are right. There are certain things we can't say. Incitement to violence is the threshold, possible, imminent, and prescriptive, and that's a very high threshold. And I'd say that's a very good threshold to have. If it was lower, the things that fall into that scope of remit just start to infringe on everyday life, speech, views, opinions, and commentary. We need to have a high threshold in order for us to advance knowledge, to advance conversation, to advance as a society.
And there are words that are offensive, and that is still, I mean, that's on the statute books here in New Zealand. But I like your point that actually, if people use offensive language, that says something about their character, their intellect, their vocabulary. It says more about them for using those words than it does about the person that they're using those words towards, perhaps.
If someone wants to tell you exactly who they are, let them. Honestly, free speech is the greatest error correction mechanism that we have available to us. It exposes bad ideas. It exposes dangerous ideas, and then we can counter them, not through censorship, but through conversation. People are entitled to hold any number of ideas. They might not be beneficial to society as a whole, but do you know who decides that? The marketplace of ideas, not our politicians. People will opt into ideas that they see as fit for them, and then they'll exercise those ideas. And when a better idea comes along, they should be free to choose the better idea.
And hey, if your counter speech of that idea doesn't include offensive words and abusive terms, then I think people will see that holds the higher, not just moral ground, but intellectual ground as well, perhaps.
100%, 100%. The battle, I think, here is ensuring that words that we use have meaning, have clear definition, and where they don't, that we debate those things. Where there's ambiguity around what a word means and whether it's being used appropriately, we don't just write it off and put it on a list of unusable words, but we challenge each other, we debate. We actually work this out to the point where our language becomes more and more useful, more powerful, and more productive in the way that we use it.
And just finally on this one, Nathan, the English language has changed significantly over time, and that will continue to happen. What some terms meant back in the day is different than what they mean now. Is it possible that this is part of the process, that there's a broadening of terms here, or is there perhaps a more specific political agenda behind this? What's your thoughts?
Oh, 100%. I think you can track the use of certain words throughout history, see where they peaked, see where they dropped off. There's been a huge uptick in the use of certain words, especially in the online space. And language does evolve, but language is the first battleground when it comes to culture, society, ideas, and how we shape the world we live in. If we can get people on board with our ideas through the language we use, we can really shift the dial. And that goes both ways. Language has been the first tool of every dictator, but it's also been the tool that's led us to enlightenment. So we need to be on board, intentional, and we need to make sure that when we do use language, we're using it responsibly. Now, people don't always have the same measure of what's responsible and what's not,
Yeah.
you know, but it's at that point where counter speech is our greatest tool. Free speech is the greatest era of method correction, and we can't just shoo speech we don't like away under the mat or legislatively ban it or try and shout over it. It needs to exist for us to advance.
Nathan, I appreciate the way in which you use your words carefully, and hey, encourage people to connect with nzpillar.com for more information about the organisation that you lead and the important conversations that it brings. Thanks so much for being part of the program once again.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.